Good morning and a warm welcome to today's This Can Happen webinar, Surviving the Summer Holidays, Practical Positive Tips for Your Mental Health. And boy, don't we all need that at the moment. My name is Susie and I'm delighted to be facilitating this session for you today. This is another in our This Can Happen series of webinars designed to help you, your colleagues and your families at this time. So I'm just going to quickly run through how the webinar will work for those who might not have participated in one before. So our speaker, Judith, will speak to you for about 50 minutes and you'll be able to follow along on your screen, and then we'll move on to any questions you might have at the end. I know a lot of you have already submitted questions in advance, which is fantastic, and hopefully these will be covered in the webinar, but there will be points where you can ask more questions throughout. Please don't worry if you miss anything today. I know we've all got more distractions at home. You will be receiving a copy. You will be receiving this webinar via email within the next 24 hours. Okay, so as I say that you can ask a question at any time. All you need to do is type it into the question box on your right-hand side of the screen. Questions are totally anonymous and they only come to my screen. So as I say, please do feel free to contribute. Judith will probably ask you some questions throughout and ask for your contributions, and we will read those out when we can. Okay, so now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to your guest speaker today, Judith Mooring.
Thank you very much, Susie, and thank you to all of you for being here and for the amazing questions. I know that we're going to have a really interesting and hopefully helpful time for all of us over the next hour. So let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Judith Mooring and I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I have a practice on Harley Street, which now takes place in my front bedroom. I have two children aged 7 and 9. And I'm also work for the Mental Health Tribunal, so I sometimes zoom into court, and I also have a training business doing talks on mental health and well-being. So I'm lucky enough to have an interesting and exciting portfolio career, and I'm lucky enough to have 2 happy, healthy kids and a supportive partner. However, over the last 3 months, like many of us, I've experienced a bit of a perfect storm. And this talk today is very much about how we all cope with our previous expectations of what we could deliver at work and at home, and how to adapt to current circumstances. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of context. Family life before lockdown. In February this year, we went away on holiday for half term, myself and the 2 kids. We left my husband back in London working, and I organised all sorts of activities. So family life before lockdown involved going to the cinema, going to the swimming pool, having at least 2 activities every day. And I was worried even on that half-term break that we might get bored. So I had books and I had games, etc., etc. Family life before lockdown was rammed. Well, on the next slide, family life after lockdown. If you had told me in February that for the whole of April, my family, the 4 of us, would not see a single other person, a single other human being, I would have thought you were insane. If you'd have told me that my daughter would have panic attacks after watching the news and I would have similar responses, I would have thought you were insane. I would have laughed you out of my office if you'd have told me that school would close for 3 months, that the children would be out of school for 5 months, and I'd be without childcare for the majority of that time, and I'd be expected to carry on doing everything that I normally do. It's been unbelievably challenging for all of us. And, you know, the upside is there's been some great moments. It's been wonderful to spend time with the kids. The downside is the war stories. You know, I'm in court, I'm dealing with a complicated case, I'm talking to the judge, and there's a banging on the door and a kid says, "Mummy, the toilet seat's come off." And I'm just thinking, no, sorry, I'm in court, leave me alone. Or I'm trying to do some therapy with a distressed client over Zoom, and one of the children walks in and says, "What's for tea?" We've all got war stories like that, and I'd love you to send me some of those as we're moving through what your kind of war story from the last 3 or 4 months is, where you're just like, this does not add up. Who's expecting me to do this? So this has been a real perfect storm, and there's some good reasons why that is. So on the next slide, it's been a perfect storm for families because COVID-19 is a classic stress trigger, and we're going to go through in the first part of the talk why COVID-19 has been so psychologically difficult for both adults and children. It's been particularly difficult for those of us who are trying to work from home, but it's been difficult also for those of us who aren't. It's difficult for all parents, I think, because there's been a massive expansion of the job role as a parent. All of a sudden, you've taken over where the school left off, or where your nanny left off, or where the nursery left off, or where college left off. And you've got to kind of develop expertise overnight, and that's not easy. And not only that, but you don't have the normal ways of resolving those issues. So the talk basically covers 3 areas. We're going to talk about why it's been so difficult, and then we're going to have a brief check-in about looking after ourselves as parents, which is key, because if we're not in a good place as parents, we can't look after the kids. And then the last part is thinking about children-specific issues and family-specific issues, including teens and older adults and younger kids. Okay, we've got a lot to get through. I'm going to sort of dot through my slides quickly so that we have time for questions. So COVID-19 is a classic stress situation. If you've been to any of my other talks, you know that I talk about something called NUTS. Dr. Sonia Lupian, she's a brilliant psychologist from California, has come up with this idea and the piece of research around it that shows that things that are new, unpredictable, and involve a threat to the ego, so a fear of looking foolish, where a sense of control is lost, those things are nuts, literally, and they make us very stressed. Well, COVID-19 is all of those things in spades, and it continues to threaten our sense of control, and it continues to deliver uncertainty. So it's a mental health challenge on an ongoing basis. So that's why it's tricky. On the next slide. This has led to what I call the emotional spin cycle. So there was the panic that we all had in March. Look at the financial markets in March, they were panicking. Look at the governments in March, they were panicking. We got through the panic, we all went indoors, and then we started grieving. We all cried, we got very sad, we got exhausted, we were sleeping much more than usual. Then we went into anger and frustration, and then we're beginning to move into more of a grief cycle. When you're grieving, you get angry with the world. That anger has been coming out left, right, and centre in all the wrong places. It's been coming out on buses, in supermarkets, at the police, it's been coming out at schools. We're really angry that this amazing world we had has been broken. And then beyond that, you then move into these other emotions, like this hysterical happiness, the sharing of things that aren't funny, the laughing over things that really aren't amusing. And then beyond that, the boredom and the loneliness. And we fly now around this cycle from time to time in a way that normally I only see in patients who have emotional difficulties. But this emotional spin cycle is totally going on, not just for adults, not just in the office, it's going on between couples, and it's going on for our kids. So we're all in there. And it's normal, it's okay, it's not dangerous, it's not going to hurt us long term, but we need to know it's happening so we know we're not going mad. We are just suffering from stress. So please take that home. You're not going mad, you're just stressed. Okay, on the next slide, we're going to talk about, right, the other tricky thing about that. So we've got the nuts piece, we've got the emotional spin cycle. What do you normally do when you're feeling low? You talk to a friend, you see a friend. Now, speaking to friends over the phone, speaking to friends over Zoom is pretty good. However, sadly, it's not as good as seeing people in 3 dimensions. We get a lot more information from seeing people 3D than we do seeing them on Zoom. We get information from the way they smell, we get information from micro expressions of the face, and we get information from body language, posture, and even things like heart rate. All of that's happening subconsciously without us being aware of it through our autonomic nervous system and our mirror neurons. There's a lot of complex neuroscience. I won't go into it, but suffice it to say, Zoom doesn't add up to the full package when it comes to interacting with other humans. And we lost all of that face-to-face contact, which is one of our major resilience pieces. That all went missing in April completely. It's sort of sneaking back in now, and it's really important we put the face-to-face back in. But in particular for children, I think this piece hasn't really been thought about. You know, we gave them their education as well as we could. We've tried our best, let's be honest, we all have. But you can't give them teacher relationships, friend relationships, jokes, games, running around the playground. You can't give them the emotional regulation, the normality of school, and that's a huge loss to them. So whilst we might be trying to deliver our work from home and coping, I think kids are having a tough time. Okay, on the next slide, we're just going to talk a little bit about, yes, the expanded job role. I love this because it just makes me laugh. It just cracks me up. It's like, I have 3 jobs already. You know, I have 3 jobs that bring in money, and I'm a parent and I try and be engaged. So that was what I was doing before lockdown, you know, tribunal, psychiatrist, teacher trainer, very happy, very busy, pretty overwhelmed at times anyway. And then you add to that I'm meant to be homeschooling my kids. I'm meant to be counselling my kids, my friends, my family. I need to run a store, so I don't have to go to the shops. I need to cook, I need to clean. Obviously, my husband's doing more than 50% a lot of the time, but there's the two of us doing this together. IT and audio visual technician, so the Zoom works. Financial planner and strategist, so we've got enough money in when we've got a plan B in case one of us loses our job. And then we have to reorganize the house so everybody can study from home and do DIY because the toilet seat's fallen off again or the curtain's fallen down in our bedroom. And then also caring for elderly relatives, making sure they're okay, and neighbours. It is just impossible. And, I think many of us who are high achieving, who have interesting, busy careers, have very high expectations for ourselves. And it's just been like a sort of slow motion car crash, realizing that you can't meet those expectations for yourself anymore. You just can't even get there. It's like, of course, it's not possible. So take that home. It's not possible to do all these things. None of us can do it. Nobody's acing this. Okay. So just moving on. Haha, and now the final joke. 8 weeks of school holidays. School holidays, the usual time where we get to enjoy ourselves and relax and eat ice lollies and sit in the sun. Now, most of us at this point are finding our resilience levels are a little bit low because we've had to just deal with a 3 months that nobody's ever dealt with before. And we've had to do it with less control and less social support and less time. And we've had to do it with the impact on children being massively underestimated. And now we're meant to make something nice of the next 8 weeks with possibly no extra resource, with possibly nobody else to help out. So it's a challenge, but we will manage. I know we're going to make a success of this in some small way. And we're doing it. And on the next slide, this is my little graph of a mood chart. I like to do mood charts. Normally I do them with my patients who have bipolar. It tells me where people are at with their mood. And this mood chart, I think, sums up the moods I've been picking up from colleagues, clients, and friends over the last 4 months. In March, the blue line shows peak anxiety. We got 10 out of 10 for anxiety. Anxiety is generally coming down for most of us. For some people, it's ticking up again in June as we begin to emerge from lockdown. We then have boredom. We weren't bored in March at all. We were scared. We got gradually more bored through April and May until in May we were peak bored, and we possibly are still at peak bored. I know we're pretty bored at times in our household. What we are now all at is probably peak over this. I am over the uncertainty. I am over the lack of childcare. I am over all of this. It's just, I really want real life to come back, and I have to acknowledge it won't. And I know we're going to be okay, but I'm still over this a lot of the time, and I think we all are. So that's the beginning of the context piece. That's the context in which we are currently parenting and working. And I think it's important before we dig into the detail of parenting that we take a step back and go, oh yeah, context. Of course I'm not acing, my kid is not acing her spelling. Of course I'm frazzled. We need to take a look at the context because it's massive. Society's never been through something the size of what we've just been through. Okay, we can move now on to the next slide, which is looking after ourselves as parents. But before we get into that section, I want to take questions, feedback, comments, particularly probably thinking a little bit about context, etc. But anything there, Susie, over to you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we got some great comments coming in. So yes, we've said that someone's just said they're a very sociable family and they're really suffering badly from the isolation. Even when we're getting to see a few friends, the lack of physical contact and hugs is hard. Yeah, yeah, it's hard not to touch people. That sounds wrong, doesn't it? But you know what I mean? I find that quite hard.
Yeah.
Yes. Go on. Do you want to say something?
The reason I've highlighted isolation is it comes up in the next two parts of the talk. Isolation is underestimated as a cause of stress, but we really are quite social. And actually, it is hard not to touch people. It's probably very important from an infection perspective not to touch other adults. Kids touching each other and more relaxed, apart from your partner.
Yeah, children maybe, if you have to.
Yeah.
So their war stories just be, working full time at home, underlying health condition, husband working, key worker, 3 teenage children, A levels, GCSEs gone, 13-year-old on gadgets, but they're okay, they're getting there. And then there's a question here about my daughter's been shielding with me alone, and therefore I've been her safe place throughout. Now after 4 months, she's fearful of not wanting to go to bed alone. She calls out to me if I go upstairs. She's desperately in need of seeing other people. Any suggestions?
I would it sounds to me like she needs to begin to emerge in some way. And I think your decisions around emerging are going to be based on probably medical advice regarding the shielding and to what extent that's necessary and what is and isn't safe. I think there is a balance to be struck between the downsides of being at home all alone all the time and the downsides of potential risk and infection in the community. So balancing those two things, because obviously we've all gone to kind of, we have to lock down to control the infection. Well, we do, but we also have to balance to some extent other health and psychology needs. So I would say speak to whoever's advised you on the shielding. Hope that helps.
Right, yeah, someone's just said, how do I manage relations between my 3 teenage sons? Could be there all day with that, probably.
Yes, and there's lots of people have asked questions about managing teams and managing relationships. So I think what we might do is we might head into the next piece, which is about resilience and adult resilience. Let's have a think. And then we'll come back to teenagers in the last piece, which is more about managing children. Is that okay?
Yes, to you about children. Yeah, great. Okay.
Lovely. Great. Thank you. Okay. So the next piece is really thinking about looking after ourselves as adults. And the reason why I've put it in first is because we can't parent well unless we've first parented ourselves to an extent. Unless we've found a calm space, unless we've found a compassionate space, it's difficult to be calm, compassionate, and thoughtful about our children. It's a big ask, but it's probably central to any piece of family therapy, and it's central to parenting, is find the space in you that makes you resilient, because then you can help your kids better. And it feels to me as if we need to have a bit of a reset, all of us, because we've all had a very monotonous 3 months, monotonous and stressful. The last 3 months have very much felt like Groundhog Day, and we're all kind of bored, lonely, irritable, and fed up. So I'd like to think about pressing a reset button. And I'm just using a simple model of add something new, change some things, and take some things away. And I'm thinking about what we've done over the last 3 months. What do you want to add to that? What's feasible to add to that? What do you want to change within that? And what do you really want to take away? So what might we add to our parenting? Well, this is something that is coming up a lot in individual sessions with clients, and again, with conversations with friends and family, and also conversations at home. We need to appreciate ourselves. We spend a lot of time telling our kids how well they've done, but when do we ever say the same to ourselves? When do we ever actually say, you know what, the last 3 months have been really hard, and you've done an okay job, I'm quite proud of you? We don't, do we? It's not something we've learned to do, it's not something we've been taught to do, it doesn't feel natural. But lockdown is particularly tricky for us as adults because we lose the day-to-day strokes we normally get from colleagues. We lose the day-to-day, you're doing okay, that went well, good talk, I like your piece on such and such. We lose a lot of that, and we're on our own, we're isolated, and we don't get that positive feedback. So we have to take time to notice what you've achieved and done, and we have to make this a practice. And what's tricky in lockdown is that you'll often think that nothing went well today. It was chaos. I feel like I've been split in 68 directions. But I do think we do need to make it a practice moving forward. And we could start by noticing what's gone well in lockdown for you as a parent. Anyone got any feedback specifically on that one? What's gone well for you as a parent? Susie, anything that you would say has gone well for you?
Yeah, I sort of feel I know my children better, and that, you know, I think when you hit a crisis point with sort of home education, then you come out the other end, it's better. And we all eat together, do more stuff together. I mean, yeah, I'm a bit bored, like you were saying, of your graph. We've all lost a bit of momentum and a bit like, oh, but you know.
Yeah, so I think there's things that we can notice where we go, you know, I for instance know my children's schooling much better. I know where they're at, I know what their strengths and weaknesses are. We have spent much more time together as a family. We are better at they are better at occupying themselves. They've just had to do it, so they've got better. And I now, above my desk, I've got 2 little post-it notes. One says what could possibly go right, which is something I look at whenever I'm feeling fed up. It's like, right, what could possibly go right? And then I look back through the day and there's lots of things that have gone right. I just don't notice them. And the other thing is what went well today, because it really helps me to have those to look at.
Someone just said, one thing that's gone well is that we're all alive, we have not killed each other, and we're all fed and well. Absolutely.
Yeah. I like to start with the basics. It's like when you've got a newborn and you go, well, I'm dressed and we've all been fed. So it's like, yeah, that's a good thing that's gone well today. Okay, so appreciate yourself. Please
I fixed
appreciate
the
yourself.
toilet seat. There you go. I fixed the toilet seat last night. Win. There you go. Sorry, I'm done now.
Is that from my husband upstairs? I bet it is. I bet he's listening in. I'm going to go and test the toilet after this. Oh dear. Right. Sorry, he's in his office upstairs. So let's move on to what we can change. Okay, change something. At the start of this, I was really good at getting out and exercising, and I've noticed that slipped in June because I've been working more. And I've said to myself, right, my changing of something for me as a parent is to review my self-care every 6 to 8 weeks. Self-care has 3 core components. This is true for children and for adults. For children, instead of alcohol, I look at nutrition. So the one at the top for adults is alcohol. With children, I would look at nutrition and making sure they're eating properly. But for all of us, there's this holy trinity of self-care, which is what do we put into our mouths? And for all of us as adults, we need to be monitoring our alcohol intake and drinking no more than 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 to 2 drinks 3 to 4 times weekly. Because otherwise, very soon our sleep goes awry, our weight tends to go up, the energy levels drop, the anxiety goes up. The other thing is sleep, making sure you get enough sleep. We all need basically about 7 hours. So get the screens out of bedrooms, turn the internet off, make it a family rule that phones and devices are kept out of bedrooms, create a 7 o'clock box somewhere in the house. And if there are teens watching screens at night, turn the internet in the house off. It will cause a riot. It's a riot worth having. And then exercise, a minimum of 30 minutes 3 times weekly, but more realistically, I'd say actually at the moment we all need to be getting out every day for a minimum of 30 to 45-minute walk. So if you're going to change something, think about this first of all. There may be other things that you want to put in your ACT model. You might say, I'm going to add the appreciation, I'm going to change something else for me and how I look after myself. But look after yourself well. And then the final thing, what would we take away from our parenting? And on the next slide, I have, yeah, I would take away the chronic self-criticism. I've got some great questions here that people have said, how do I stop feeling guilty? How do I cope with feeling like a failure as a parent? How do I cope with family expectations of trying to do everything really well? What we are expecting of ourselves is unrealistic. So just turn down our expectations. It's not admitting defeat, it's admitting reality. This is the most imperfect of situations. It is totally imperfect. It's rubbish. You know, teachers don't want to not teach the children. Shops don't want to not be open. People would really like to return to the old normal if at all possible. It's really imperfect for everybody. So we don't need to be perfect, but we do need to be good enough for our kids and our jobs. And actually, one of the ways of being good enough is to stop with the self-criticism, because self-criticism makes us anxious, irritable, snappy, and unhappy. And particularly with children, if you're already in a bad headspace, say because you feel like you should have delivered the talk, you know, you should have delivered a piece of work earlier and you're on the back foot and you're not doing enough in terms of returning calls and you're criticizing yourself, and then your kid comes in and says, Mummy, can you do my algebra with me? You're going to bite their head off. Whereas if you're like, okay, I'm doing my best, this is really hard, and I'm going to make myself a cup of tea, take a deep breath, go back in and try and get something else done. And then your kid comes in and says, can I help you with algebra? You're more likely to say, give me half an hour, I may be able to do it with you at lunchtime. If not lunchtime, then this evening. So if we have our self-critic turned up really, really high, and if we're being very perfectionist, we will end up translating that into the rest of the family and possibly making the rest of the family feel anxious, critical, and perfectionist. Learn to say no, or at least not now, and recognize that 80% might be the most you can give just now, and that's fine. That's more than fine. So that would be my ACT for most of the adults I know. And then just moving forward through the slides here. Love yourself the way you love your kids. This is, again, is a big ask, but self-compassion, being kind to yourself, is a central part of being kind and compassionate to other people. We care for our children the way we care for ourselves. So if we don't care for ourselves, our children will grow up thinking that people don't care for themselves. Our children watch and learn, and most of our communication is non-verbal. They know what's going on under the surface. So if we can be kind and compassionate to ourselves, we're going to have greater reserves of kindness and compassion for them and for our friends, and we're going to be happier, and we're going to get on better with our colleagues as fellow workers. Otherwise, as Oscar H5 said, being a grown-up just means drinking a lot of beer and shouting. And I know we've all done plenty of drinking beer and wine and shouting recently, but try and love yourself the way you love your kids. It's a big ask, but it's a good thing to take away, I think. Okay, on the last slide on this section, we have, oh, that's it for looking after adults. Right. Any questions about those slides, Susie? I'm going to go through one of the questions we were sent in, which was about being in isolation means facing yourself. And then Susie, I'll take some questions from you. Is that okay?
Yes, there is a couple. Okay, should we wait till then? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so I'll do the question. Somebody asked a question about being in isolation, being in lockdown means that I'm much more aware of myself, which can be quite difficult. And I think that is true, that we're kind of more aware of our own strengths and weaknesses. And that last section there was very much about all of those things, saying we must look after ourselves. What I would say at the moment in terms of isolation and being in lockdown is we have permission now to emerge to some extent from that. And that means that we can actually begin to talk to other people, begin to blow off some of the emotions we may have built up whilst in lockdown. We may be able to explore relationships with others again, which I think will help us to be less self-focused and less concerned about our own issues. Susie, what other feedback have we got?
do you have any recommendations for how to turn our self-critic down? That's a good question.
It's a great question. The first thing to do with turning down your self-critic is to be aware of it. So you have to know it's there and you have to know its voice. And if you can welcome it as a friend and say, I know who you are and I know what you're trying to do, the self-critic is trying to help us, but it's a false friend. And if your self-critic's very busy, all the self-care stuff will help anyway, all the sleep, exercise, etc. But I would advise you very strongly to notice what you've done okay today. I don't say to people, say what you've done well, but I would say, what's been okay today? What could you say back to the self-critic that you've done okay? Even if it's really simple, even if it's putting a meal on the table, doing your online shop, putting a load of laundry on. What did I do well today? And make that a daily practice. The practice is known as gratitudes. It's from the positive psychology movement, and it's evidence-based at improving mood and happiness. If you can notice what you've done well, then it gives you a little bit of ammunition to say to the self-critic, I get your point, I could have been 110%, but let's be realistic. I've actually done all these things well today, so thank you very much. So that would be my take home on that.
Thank you. I had quite a few comments about people feeling guilty that they're not doing anything right, that the schooling they're not doing properly, the work, the pressures of it all, which I... And then someone said, which is nice, my daughter left a post-it note with you on saying you're the best mummy and daddy ever. This keeps me going during the day when I'm doubting everything that I do. It's nice.
Oh, thank you. That's so lovely. That's such a lovely thing to have, isn't it? Yeah, that's why I've set the context at the beginning. Is like we've all just put ourselves in an impossible position, and you can look back in history. There's never been a time when parents have been expected to work from home, deliver their jobs in the normal way, and at the same time look after their children and educate their children without any structural support around. It's really, really difficult. So no wonder we all feel like we're dropping the ball left, right, and centre. But you're not. Just the simple things, just the basics is really more than good enough. It really is. Because what else can we expect of ourselves? None of us is superhuman. So yeah, just really look at the context, be grateful to yourself and say, actually, I'm doing this okay. So looking after children, and we will just run through these slides. There are lots of concerns and worries and wobbles that I've heard, obviously both in our house and from friends and through the feedback that you've all really kindly, the questions you sent in beforehand. A lot of children are more regressed. A lot of adults are more regressed at the moment as well. Most of us are finding that I'm wearing leggings at the moment, for instance. I haven't worn a kind of proper work outfit for 3 months. So adults are a bit regressed, children are a bit regressed. Don't worry so much about that. It's a normal response to stress. It will get better over time. Don't criticize it, don't beat it up in yourself or your children. Nurture it and let it be, and it will settle as we emerge. If you find, a child's really regressed so that they've, slipped back in their potty training or something, just, I would say, reboot, reset, just try and encourage them back on track. And the same, with children getting into your bed at night, try and encourage them back on track. It's understandable. It's not pathological. Lots of anger and tantrums. This isn't a great time to diagnose a behavioural problem in a child, so I wouldn't be rushing to say, oh, my child's got ADHD because they can't sit still. they're at the moment suffering from a lot of stress, so they may be expressing that through anger or through talking back. I know our children have been less easy to manage than usual. Educational underperformance, well, are we surprised? The schools are shut. We're not teachers. Teaching isn't just about reading a PowerPoint or doing a worksheet. Teachers are highly skilled individuals, and I'm more appreciative than ever of the teachers at our school for the work that they do when they're able to see the children face to face, because it's not the same when it's a slide. Lack of motivation is a big issue for teens, particularly those who've had their GCSEs or A levels taken away. What does this say to them about how they move forward? It's a difficult time. Mood swings and tantrums, and that's usually just fellow adults. I find there's plenty of mood swings and tantrums amongst the fellow adults. So you've sent in lots of concerns for kids, and we'll run through some of those as we go through questions and as we go through the slides, but this is the areas I'm hoping we can think about. And we'll start with a simple way of managing a lot of things. Make time to listen. Emotions aren't harmful. We tend to learn in our society that we should ignore or dismiss emotions because they are in some way bad or weak. And in my experience as a therapist and as an adult, emotions are often the time when I'm at my strongest. When I'm really accessing an emotion and letting it out, it hurts. I'm distressed. But once I've passed through that emotional state, I feel better. Emotions aren't harmful, but they are harmful when they're ignored. So our kids have all been through the same spin cycle we have, and they've been anxious and bored and lonely. My daughter's very emotionally expressive, and she's told me all about the wobbly legs she had from the anxiety. She's told me about the tears over the loss of school, how she misses her teachers. My son has been angry and shouty and very controlling of me. He wants to be in charge. And really the simplest thing in this situation is to talk about your own feelings, to model it, to just say, yeah, I found it really hard having to work from home. I found it worrying. That's, it is a worrying time, isn't it? Because then your kids go, oh, this is normal. This isn't pathological. It's normal to feel emotions. That's okay to feel emotions. And it's okay to talk about emotions. You don't have to problem solve with emotions either. Just giving them airtime, particularly I find with children, it's like a cloud passing over the sun. They cry, 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 cry. You listen, you hug, you let it be. And then it's, oh, mummy, will you play a game with me now? The emotion's passed. It's that simple act of listening, giving them space, letting them pass. You don't have to problem solve. The problem may have been the emotion, it may well have passed. And we use something called the Unworry book, which is a nice book for children between about 8 and 12. There are many other books. There's the Anxiety Gremlin book is also a really good anxiety book that's very good. So make time to listen. Next slide is, yeah, so this is a really good time to add. And I would say to all of us who have struggled with parenting over the last 3 months, because society, apart from in certain parts of the country, we're generally emerging from lockdown, COVID-19 hasn't gone away, but society is opening up. And that allows us to ask our kids what they want to add to their new post-lockdown life. This will resolve many of the issues that we're all struggling with, or it will resolve some of them certainly. Simple things for our kids now seem really special. So seeing friends, they now ask every day, am I going to be able to see so-and-so face to face? Being outdoors and having time from us. The time from us can be difficult to give when we've got lots of work to do. But you may now be feeling confident enough to get time from someone else. Your children may be able to return to nursery or to school part-time. You may be able to get a caregiver in part-time to help you out. So for kids, going outdoors and seeing friends really helps with some of the emotional issues that we've discussed. And if they're not yet ready to do that, then do it in a graded way. But I would very strongly encourage you to get into a routine of your children seeing other people face to face if possible, because it's good for their brains, it's good for them cognitively, it's good for them socially, it's good for them emotionally. The difficulty with that is that you then become your kid's concierge, which is another demand on your time, particularly if you've got children who need ferrying around places. But at the moment, that feels like a price to pay. If I can schedule stuff in for my kids where they're seeing friends, that feels really important. Okay, what would we change for our kids? My daughter said yesterday, I am so fed up of our house. And I said, yeah, you know what, so am I. And we've booked a couple of staycations where we'll be in the UK in another property, so like a self-catering cottage or something. We're going away for a couple of places in the UK where we can drive. It's low risk, it's no drama, and it's a change of scene. For some of that time, I may be doing some work from home, but there's going to be some time when I'm definitely not working either. So have a change of scene, reduce your hours if at all possible, because I think over the summer, if we can change pace, that will help enormously. Do a drop and swap play date. If you've got other families who are not shielding and who feel confident, you can take, from next week, we're allowed to have children each other, have people in each other's houses. So you could, for instance, say to a fellow parent who's working, why don't you have my kids for the morning and I'll have yours for the afternoon, and I get a morning done and you get the afternoon done. So drop and swap play dates are great. You can enroll grandparents for virtual lessons if you want to. It's free. It's a simple thing to do. Get the grandparents to talk the kids through something, or the kids can watch horrible histories and then say to talk to their grandparents about the Romans, or play chess, or do some bedtime storytelling. So having a change of caregiver is really helpful. Childcare, it is okay now. It is within the guidance to have a child carer back in the house under government guidance, and it's some of the nurseries are reopening. And we've got very fed up of cooking in our house, so we've had some different takeouts. We have different, nice pre-prepared meals, because I'm not going to spend all day doing 16 jobs and then cook a fresh meal. I just can't do it. So have a bit of a change, there. And then the last thing, what would we take away? Well, a lot of you have said in your feedback. Sorry, no, this is the next slide. You're on that one, yeah. Thank you. A lot of you said in your feedback, what can we do about screens? There are certain things that I would like to take away for the summer. One of them is this relentless focus on academics being the most important thing. At the moment, if your child isn't calm and happy, they're not going to learn anything anyway. So try and get your child to calm and happy before we start saying, let's have a maths tutor, let's get them doing extra this, that, the other. Every single child in the country will be disadvantaged by this, everybody. And the disadvantage is pretty much universal. So don't think that your child has to keep up with the expectations that might have been there before, because every single child will be disadvantaged. So focus on getting your child to happy and calm before worrying about whether they're a maths whiz. I would like to take away the lack of social contact. I've talked a lot about the importance of that to our emotional regulation. I'd like to take away the lack of childcare for all of us, because I don't think it's realistic for working parents to manage without childcare. It just isn't. And if there are ways that we can, as individual families, make decisions to give us a little bit of childcare, it makes a massive difference. We can all breathe a little now. I'd like to take away the lack of exercise for my kids. They're not doing as much as they would. And the lack of routine created schedule. Screen time. Okay, too much screen time. Screens are not all bad, particularly for teens. They are probably, most teenagers have too longer on screens than we would want. What I would say is if they're playing games that involve them socializing with friends virtually, that's a reasonably good thing, so long as it's not for hours and hours and hours. And if you could encourage them to do some genuine face-to-face socializing as well, that would be great. The other thing I'd say is it's really worth looking at turning off your internet at night. Screens at night are a disaster for teens because they interrupt sleep. And interrupted sleep is really not good for anyone's mental health, and teenagers need more sleep than the rest of us. So look at making sure that they can't access the internet at night, and look at instating a blanket rule of no screens in bedrooms for anyone, adults included. It's a big ask, but if you set that expectation for everybody, then it's easier to reset the expectation for your kids. Our kids have started a swear box for us, because that's what we need to stop. They've learned some amazing swear words in lockdown. So yeah, a simple add, continue, take away for kids, which hopefully will address some of the issues that have been raised so far. Okay, do we want to pause for questions or continue? What do you think, Susie?
I've had so many questions in, and it's great. I'm just wondering whether to press on and do them at the end. There's a lot about children, worrying about not seeing their friends, not wanting to see their friends, wanting to go back to school, all that sort of stuff.
Okay, I'm going to plug on through the slides, and then we'll have, what's the time now? Where are we up to with time?
22.
Fine. Okay, I'm going to plug on through the slides. Okay, super quickly, prepare for the unexpected. This slide is about the fact that 2 weeks ago my son got a cold. Because my son had a cold and a temperature, we all had to go to get tested. It was a nightmare. It was actually all right in the end, but it was a bit stressful because we had to book the test, cancel everything else that we were trying to do that day, such as the children going to school, which they got, and some childcare that we had. So cancel all that, communicate with that with everybody, and then go and get the test, and then come back and then basically lock down for 2 days while we waited for the results. We will all go through that a number of times over the next 9 to 12 months. That's going to happen to all of us as families, that somebody gets sick and we all have to get tested, we all have to get self-isolate. So just be ready for that to happen, because actually it's fine, but it's a bit of a shock when it first comes to you. You're like, oh my goodness. We were trying to be as calm as possible. We managed to be as calm as possible. The results came back negative. It was all okay. And one of the things that helped me was we happened to have a stack of lockdown activities that I hadn't opened. And one of those was a self-assembly castle. And when it was raining and we were glum and we couldn't do anything else, we spent 3 hours putting the castle together as a family. So have maybe a little stock for something unexpected. And there's lots of other unexpected things. We need to be prepared for swimming in the sea, for outdoor socializing, etc., etc. Okay, next slide is what is safe? Okay, so this is a whole talk in itself. And if you're very concerned, I suggest that you have a look at some of the public health websites, both in the UK and the US. It's easier to prove what's definitely unsafe in terms of public health than what is safe. And we know that groups of adults indoors can easily spread COVID-19, particularly when they're eating, drinking, and socializing. But we don't have good evidence that children spread it in the same way. We also know that being outdoors is very safe in terms of transmission rates. Very safe. There was a study of 7,500 people in China at the height of the pandemic in Wuhan, and only one case was apparently caught outdoors. Outdoors is safer because of ventilation and ultraviolet light. And that makes me feel comfortable with outdoor playdates, with playgrounds, and with sports and holiday clubs. And I've had similar feedback from colleagues in public health. So for me, I feel comfortable with the kids running around outdoors with other kids. And that's freed me up a little bit to think in my thinking about what we can do. Okay, on the next slide, grandparents. Grandparents are normally a key part of our summer holiday plans, and they're certainly a part of our family network. COVID-19 hasn't gone anywhere. It's a particular risk for older adults. So if you're really keen to holiday with grandparents, stay in separate accommodation from them with a separate bathroom and kitchen. If you want to see grandparents regularly, and we now do see my parents regularly, we always meet outdoors and we have completely separate food. We don't share food. We don't share drinking vessels, and I clean the loo before they come, and then they have a loo that's theirs, and I've bleached all the handles, etc. And if we go to theirs, we sit outdoors, we picnic outdoors, and I clean their loo before we leave. So with grandparents, it is important to see them. It's important cognitively for older people to see other people as well. So there's a reason why I'm going to see them regularly. It's because they need some company. They are also driving to us because they need to keep driving or they'll forget how to do it. So there's a piece around making sure they have a routine too. But make sure you're doing it safely, and that may well need to continue long term until we have a vaccine. In terms of going on holiday, only go on holiday somewhere that you're insured and you'd be prepared to be ill, because believe me, you don't want to be ill somewhere you can't get home and there isn't good hospital care. And that particularly applies to going to islands. Islands have particularly poor hospital systems. Be thoughtful before you all fly to somewhere where there isn't a decent hospital on the island, because you might not be allowed to travel off the island if somebody's got COVID and you might be very sick. I hate to be negative, but I think it's worth being realistic about what you're planning. Okay. Okay, so moving on. Autonomy, responsibility, and reward. This is very much speaking about teenagers and how unmotivated it is for them. All of our kids need autonomy, and older kids need it even more so. Autonomy basically means the ability to make their own choices and decisions. And one of the problems, I think, with our kind of approach to schooling, etc., is we spend a lot of time shutting down kids' decisions, saying, well, you're going to do that, you're going to do that, you're going to do that. They really do need to make choices, and so they also need responsibilities. Kids benefit from being given the responsibility of doing things on their own. And I mean, my daughter said to me a number of times, I wish I had a job. So delivering the paper to a neighbour or household chores, really good things to improve kids' self-esteem, and you can reward them for jobs done, give them real work and real rewards, especially teenagers. The people I know who've motivated their teens properly have paid them properly. And I've got a niece who's busy going out baking cookies and selling them to make money to buy a laptop. And I've got friends whose kids have been paid to do gardening, who've been paid to do shopping, who've been paid to do housework or decorating. So praise effort, not outcome, because that is shown to improve motivation. But think about what your kids could do that's sort of like a real job, even if it's possibly caring or looking after for somebody else's younger children for an hour or two. If they've got the responsibility to do that, that would be good. Okay, and we are nearly there with the slides. Don't be afraid of boredom. Boredom is really good for brains, really good for kids' brains. It fosters creativity. and we can only really find out what interests us when we're free to fill our own time. So it's not doing them any harm at all, and it encourages children to learn how to occupy themselves, which is a really important skill in adult life. So don't be afraid of boredom, particularly with younger children. Just put stuff out and cope with the mess. And then on the last slide, I think we have, is this an opportunity to be less alpha? Over the last 20 years, academic expectations of our kids have really grown enormously, and there's been a huge mental health crisis in teens at the same time. And I think the two are linked. There's the expectation now that children will get all A's or A stars, that every child is going to be a superstar. The reality is that our children are moving into a world that we don't even know. We don't know what shape it's going to be, and they're going to need all sorts of different skills. So I wonder if it's time to re-examine the way that we focus so narrowly on the academic, and to reduce the overscheduling and over-involvement, and to let them get a bit bored and not worry too much about it, and just say, well, life can be boring. You know, you have to find a way to occupy yourselves. So I think take the pressure off us to occupy them. Okay, so that brings us to questions. That's what we've covered. Add, change, take away, try and have a rest before September, and good luck. Let's go into all the questions that you guys have sent in.
Oh, thanks so much, Judith. That's great. Okay, I'm just going to crack on. Oh, someone said, my son is using his IT skills to transfer my old VHS tapes to digital, paying him half price of eBay, but great income. Yeah, that's good.
Fantastic. Yep.
My teenager's having a real problem sleeping. What can I do?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Teenagers problem sleeping. So teenagers have their sleep-wake cycle changes. They go to bed later than we do. I would suggest that you can change your expectations a little bit. They don't have to get up quite as early as normal, and that's okay at the moment. So an alarm at about 10 in the morning, and probably going to, this is going to sound really counterintuitive, possibly going to bed a bit later, but with a firm rule that there are no screens after, say, 9 p.m. So you can say to your teenager, I know that it's hard for you to get to sleep, but you might want to read a book, or do some writing or some craft between about 9 and 11, and then settle yourself down late, because their sleep-wake cycle has shifted. The other thing that helps with sleep is getting up and getting out in the morning, even if just for a walk. So you could give her a job of walking to a local shop to get lunch. So that's your job. Go and get lunch. You need to do that by at 12 o'clock or something, which means you've got to get up and go outside for a walk. Daylight and exercise helps set sleep.
Great, thank you. Someone said, as a divorced parent, my child has spent the entire lockdown with their mother, and as a result, I've had almost no contact with him, and our relationship is struggling. How can I re-establish the relationship with him, and will he be confident with me over the summer?
That's a really good question. I'm sorry, because it must have been very difficult being away from your child. I'd say try and negotiate with your ex about what contact's going to look like, and you might want to do small amounts of contact, like a couple of contact visits in local park first, and then before doing like a long piece. But I would probably say it's worth you advocating that you do have a longer piece of access, like a week or two of holiday with your child, and then advocating to your partner that you would like to continue regular face-to-face access, because it's important for everybody, if possible. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Someone said that their 8-year-old daughter has started leaving her food, and she's very, very quiet, even around close relatives. How can I help her? Helpful actually about children. You might want to do it in one go, becoming more introverted since lockdown and not seeming to want to go out and see their friends. Sorry, I don't mean to bung everyone's questions together, but you know what I mean.
No, thank you everybody for all of those questions. These preteens are quite emotionally sensitive, and they don't have great skills to manage a lot of this, and that's why there was a piece about talking about emotions and modeling emotions. And I'm very open with my kids about, Mummy's finding this really hard. It's hard not seeing my friends, isn't it? Because if you talk about that, they will begin to find some words to talk to you back. Whereas if you focus it more on a kind of tell me how you're feeling, they may not have the words to say how they're feeling. So I would model the fact that it's been really hard being away from school. I would talk about the fact it's been hard missing friends. And then I would also we have to do a graded return to normal life, all of us, because socializing now is more stressful just because we haven't done it for a while. We're out of practice. So I would probably say, do you want to have one friend just into the garden for an hour or two? Which friend would you like? rather than saying, oh, let's go get you straight back into school and work the hurly-burly of the playground, there might be one or two special friends that your daughter might like to see. So I hope that helps. Just graded return to normal.
Thank you. Any suggestions for families in which one partner has been enjoying not being in the office while the other is really struggling? There's also another one about someone who's a key worker who's out all the time, who wants to be at home with their family, someone who's been at home all the time who obviously wants to go out. That sort of dilemma.
Yeah, that is really tough when one of you is. I think it's about having conversations within families about the fact this is impacting all of us differently, and what worked previously isn't necessarily going to work now. Particularly the kind of one person's got a 110% career, and the other person is kind of working and also trying to cover all the bases. The person with a 110% career has to understand that the other person has now got to cover all the bases on their own. So things have to be rethought. So you can't just say, well, I was doing it, it was working before, so why is it not working now? Well, it's not working now because the parent who might be at home or who's working part-time is now trying to do 68 people's jobs as well as their own. So I do think it comes down to conversations. My partner and I have made time to not watch TV. Some evenings we don't watch TV, we consciously go into a different room and we sit down with our supper and we say we're on a date. Obviously we weren't on a date, we're in the living room, but we would talk to each other as if we were on a date. And that's where we find we actually talk about difficult stuff and this isn't working for me and how can we change it.
Thank you. Oh, here's an interesting one. Would you get involved with an argument between one of your kids and a friend that has happened online? They used to be friends before lockdown, but recently they're in a group chat that's turned personal and very critical. Should I intervene? Oh, difficult.
I would ask your teenager about that and have a conversation with your teenager about how group chats can easily go nasty, because group chats can be quite horrid. I mean, if you think about what's happened on Twitter, which is basically a mass group chat experiment, Twitter's not nice. And the reason being that we don't feel disapproval online in the way that we feel it in real circumstances. So people just misbehave. So I'd have a chat with your teen about the fact that group chat is a bit toxic anyway, even for adults, and then probably ask them if there's anything that you can do to help. And again, ask them if you could suggest a couple of strategies, like maybe talking to people from the group individually, or again trying to get some face-to-face contact going.
Yeah, thank you. Just say a few of you have asked whether you can share whether you'll receive this. Just to remind everyone, you will get a copy of this webinar as you've experienced it today in the next 24 hours. Okay, I have two babies aged 5 and 6, and I'm grateful for any tips about making life a bit more fun. There you go. There you go, Judith.
Oh, making life fun with babies aged 5 and 6.
Dance.
Dance, yes.
Dance.
It also dance. It depends whether you're working. I wonder what other people would say. Because if you're working, I think it's really hard to make life fun. But if you're not working, then or working part-time, lots of water play, lots of Play-Doh, lots of pretend play, cardboard boxes in the garden, bubbles, music, beginning to see friends with similar age children. We can now go to the park, going to different places. Scavenger hunts have been really helpful in our house. I print out scavenger hunts and around the house for 20 minutes. Homemade Play-Doh, as I say, has also been quite fun. Lots of arts and crafts have happened in our house. That's gone down really well. Kids of this age really love balloons and they don't break ornaments. And pillow fights. We've done a lot of pillow fighting when we're all cross and frustrated, go into the garden, thwack each other with cushions. So yeah, I don't know if any of that's any good.
Oh dear, thank you. Someone said that they find that those with children at home at the moment understand all the pressures, and that they're finding that those at work with no children at home just don't seem to understand the difficulties. Any tips for that?
I agree. I think if you're not working with children in the house, you can't really understand the degree of interruption, the degree of frustration, and the amount of effort and energy required. I think just keep. That sounds difficult. Keep flagging it up. Just say we've got the children at home and there's no one else to look after them, so it's not possible for me to deliver the same way as usual. I don't know if anybody else has got any feedback on that one, but that would be my advice. It is really difficult, and maybe engage other colleagues who do have children at home to feedback to those who don't, because it feels like that might be a useful topic of a team meeting, that the people who've got kids at home are trying their best, because the people without kids at home might say, well, actually I feel quite lonely, so you guys are lucky because at least you've got company.
Yeah, true. Oh, Judith, this is one of our questions from your previous webinars. Any advice for looking after elderly parents who are not willing to follow lockdown rules? But this is my too,
Oh,
actually.
this is a cracker. It's a cracker. Look, they're old enough and silly enough. I mean, really, it's so frustrating. This is a common conversation. I think to say that it's not just the flu and to give them advice about particular situations. So I wouldn't be sending elderly relatives into the pub, for instance. I think that's a really bad idea. The hairdresser, you know, I get that. And it's probably a little bit less risky because there's a little fewer people. But I think I think obviously older relatives are bored and frustrated as well. But it's not just the flu; it can be very serious. Yeah, just keep on, and you can also engage. You might be able to engage other elderly relatives like aunts and great aunts and uncles or aunts and uncles in to have a chat. That can sometimes help.
Someone's changing tack completely. Someone's just recommended something called ornament gel. Apparently, it protects your ornaments and stuff inside from indoor football and such like. There you go.
I wouldn't be as bold as to suggest indoor football, not in lockdown. No, somebody in our house would have died if we'd had indoor football. But I love ornament gel. Sounds good.
Oh, yeah, you live and learn. Oh, museum gel. Oh, it's called museum gel. Sorry, not ornament gel. Museum gel. Well, there you go. Sorry. Right. One of the biggest things I find is the lack of time for me, time off from the kids, and just time to not have pressure, whatever pressure it is. Any tips for that?
Yeah, I hear you. I've kind of disappeared off the list. I'm somewhere underneath the dog that we don't have. I think this is why the self-care piece is there. If I can at least get out of the house for a walk every day, I feel a lot more human. And if I get to do a couple of workouts a week, I feel a lot more human. And one of the ways of doing that is to schedule time for me like it's a work appointment, and to make sure that my husband is aware that I need that time. And he does the same for his stuff. He will take out time for himself, make sure he does his runs. So schedule it like it's a work appointment, because you can't deliver on your various portfolios if you are completely exhausted. And also, if you're finding it hard to go to bed, reduce your own screen time at bedtime. Last night, we all went to bed at 9 o'clock in our house because we're all so knackered. So to go to bed earlier can be quite helpful.
Definitely. Quick one. Do you recommend St. John's Wort for older teenager who's slightly down in mood? Don't know if you have a view on
Uh,
that.
I generally don't. St. John's Wort works, and the reason it works is it contains something which is similar to an antidepressant. So it's a little bit like giving your child an antidepressant, but we don't know what the dose is, and you don't know what the potential effects are. So I would suggest, if you're getting to the point of thinking about St. John's Wort, it's similar to antidepressants, and you might want to think, am I actually should I ask for some support for them from somewhere else? So personally, I recommend, before we go to St. John's Wort, I tend to recommend a vitamin supplement called Neurosan, which is available from Holland and Barrett, because there's some evidence that people whose mood is lowered benefit from B12, folic acid, and everything that's in Neurosan. So I'd probably go to that before I went to St. John's Wort.
Great. And then a few people have said, is it okay, basically, if your child seems to be enjoying lockdown and being with their family, should you be worrying that they're not going to be able to adapt to normal school again, or should you just, crack on with it and not worry?
I think it's fantastic if your child's enjoying lockdown. It's absolutely fantastic, because there are upsides. I mean, I think we've all found, there's upsides, maybe enjoying your local area more. And my kids have really enjoyed playing with their toys. They've got so many toys that don't get played with, and now they're actually playing with them. And we're actually sometimes finding time to play games with them. And so it's great, because kids don't get enough time to play and be on their own and reflect. I think it's fantastic. Yeah, so yeah, more power to you.
Great. Someone said that this is nice. So someone said, my son said to me, I don't have to worry with you. I know I can say what I need to say and it will be okay. Meant the world to me. That's
Oh,
nice. Nice.
it's
We like a
lovely.
nice sort of positive reflection, don't we?
Mm.
Okay, look, here's an important one. If you have real concerns for your children's mental health, can you recommend a charity or somewhere to access mental health support for children? The wait for a GP is a long time.
Can I? Yes. So, gosh, there are lots of different charities, and I don't have a children's one on the tip of my tongue, which is a bit frustrating. So I think that might be something I'll have to look up and add as a resource, because I know there's the Mental Health Foundation, and they have stuff for kids. That's the one that's headed up by William and Kate. Time to Mind might also have something, but yeah, there's various adult mental health charities like Mind, etc. But I can't think of a charity that would have many resources available off the top of my head. So let me get back to you on that one.
Yeah, we can come back to you on that that afterwards. So thank you very much. Okay, so I'm really aware that that time is marching on, and we've probably all got very busy days. So thank you everybody for contributing so brilliantly today. We're both really grateful. It makes such a difference. And yeah, thank you all for everything that you've someone suggested Place to Be for children's charities.
That's the one I was thinking about. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and then yeah, Mind, apparently Mind's got a bit for children as well. Sorry. Yeah, so thank you so much. And just to reiterate again, I know I keep saying this, you will receive this webinar tomorrow by email, so please don't worry if you missed anything today. So in the This Can Happen series, there will be a webinar on the 14th of July where the various ambassadors are talking about storytelling. Details will come in due course. Finally, a brief evaluation form should pop up on your screen in a minute. It's really helpful to us if you wouldn't mind just filling that in with any feedback that you might have. And thank you all for all your positive comments as well about the webinar. We're very grateful. So without further ado, that's it. I'm now going to end the webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.